The accompanying photo of the Imperial Hotel at Narragansett must bring back many fond memories to any who still may be around and can remember those busy summers of Narragansett's golden years. About 1885, a young man named Walter A. Nye came to Narragansett Pier to work as a clerk in some of the summer hotels then numerous along the ocean front. He later became the manager of one of them, liking many activities at summer hotels, being extremely ambitious, and now having married a local young lady. Young Nye decided that much could be made in the hotel business at the pier and that he could start out for himself. So in the winter of 1893, he purchased a building on what is now Narragansett Avenue, remodeled it and added to it. In summer of 1894, opened his so-called Columbus Hotel. Mr. Nye found business good and prospered here, but still entertainment visions of having a luxurious hostelry where he could entertain families and friends of Narragansett's finest and wealthiest summer guests. He met and served many of them in his clerking days at other houses. In early summer of 1898, he obtained a large lot in what is now the northeast corner of Central and Boone Streets. He closed Columbus, which was soon given a ride by his employees of Mr. Herbert Webster, the then local building mover, to the rear of the new lot. In early summer of 1898, the Columbus arrived to become the back part of a new big hotel. In September of that year, Lewis F. Bell, contractor in Wakefield, began the construction of a new building, which would be known as the new Imperial Hotel. Work progressed rapidly. In those days, it was not uncommon for a contractor to have 50 or more carpenters on a job of that size, and by the spring of 1899, the Imperial was finished. So on the morning of June 30th, 1899, the new Hotel Imperial was open for summer guests. Always a well-met and polished host, it was the fulfillment of Mr. Nye's idea to create a place at Narragansett Pier where families, guests, and friends of the socially elite would be served with the very best, and in this he succeeded well. Not the largest hotel at Narragansett, but by far the most luxurious and well-appointed. The Imperial was now to become the summer home of Narragansett's upper centre of society. As one entered the building, up the broad front steps and across the wide and spacious porch, they had a feeling of entering the finer hotels of New York or of continental Europe. A large plush carpeted lobby, with palms and flowers making an adorable setting, opened directly at the large open stairway leading to the floors above. Of the room, on the left was the main office, and to the rear one passed into a large dining room where the best dining decorum was always in order. Guests always dressed for dinner in those days, and were met at the door by the head waiter George, and most graciously escorted to their tables. Children, except on very rare occasions, were not served in the main dining room, but just to the left was a smaller but just as luxurious dining room where the governess gave good care of family and children, assisted usually by the family lady's maid. And in those days no family came to the Imperial without a governess and lady's maid, as well as a coachman and later the family chauffeur. In the rear, on the entire In the rear on the entire lower floor was the kitchen, laundry, and all the utilities necessary to take good care of hotel patrons. The Imperial was in those years what might have been termed a very self-sufficient establishment. Each year, two special chefs, a meat cutter, a dessert maker, came from New York, and every bit of baking was done in the hotel kitchen by William, a German baker, his wife, and a rotund but nice-looking daughter named Katrina. One of the chefs made a specialty of turtle soup, not from cans, but from real turtles weighing 50 or 60 pounds apiece, which were shipped in, well iced, in barrels. One day one suddenly came to life while being taken out of the barrel, and there was some high, wide, and handsome stepping around the hotel until he was finally gotten under control. Mr. Nye also had a large farm at Judith Point, where he kept a fine herd of cows in an extensive garden from which early every morning all needed milk. Cream and vegetables came to the hotels to be prepared for the serving of the day's delicious meals. At the time the hotel was built, it was doubtful if the local lighting company would have furnished sufficient power for the needed electricity, and the large boiler and 2 generators were installed. Although the electrical needs could no doubt have been taken care of in later years by the service company, these generators served the hotel as long as was in operation. An elevator from the main to all the upper floors gave excellent service, but was a type which none are probably in use today. It ran by water pressure from the water system rather than electricity. Although long before the days of telephones in every room, each room was connected to the main office with a bell system through a so-called annunciator who sent bell hopping whenever it rang. Practically all of the service help were black, fine boys coming from a college in Philadelphia, where Mr. Nye seemed to have a standing order for his summer staff. Most of these boys were good ball players, as well as waiters and bellboys. Some may remember the exciting stories of games they played each summer with the local team at Old Mountain Field, then called Walnut Grove. Mr. J. Pardon Brown of Wakefield was for many years a maintenance service man of the hotel, while Fred Lamphere of Peacedale took care of the electrical needs and acted as a manager of the garage, which, with the coming of auto in the early years, was maintained for the convenience of hotel patrons. Mr. Lamphere's departure for other work in 1914, H.O. Stedman of Peacedale kept the lights shining and the bells ringing, with the exception of the 2 war years until the hotel's end. The original building only had 2 stories and 60 rooms, but after 2 years, in 1902, 2 additional stories were added, plus the 2 imposing towers, and an arch over the driveway which led into the service area. This then made about 90 rooms, where in those glorious summers before World War I were entertained the wealthy and social elite families of New York, Philadelphia, and elsewhere. Among them the presidents and vice presidents of Standard Oil, the Distant family of Hardwell fame, the Thomas family of E.R. Thomas Motor Co. $15,000 a week was the going price for a family with their children. Maids and governesses, which although today might not seem that much, in that time seemed a fabulous price. After more that 20 years of successful operation in the hotel was sold by Mr. Bill Nye to a New York syndicate in 1922. A gentleman named Galbraith came as manager and continued the operation much as before until that fateful night of September 6, 1923. The hotel closed officially on the Monday previous, but several guests had prevailed to Mr. Galbraith to remain open until the end of the week. A party had been held in the large game room on the lower floor that night, and a fire had been burning in the fireplace in the room. Late in the evening, towards the end of the party, a night watchman stirred up and banked the glowing embers, and it is felt sparks drawn in the chimney and ignited the dry wood and shingles on the roof. Around 3:30 a.m., the Coast Guardman in the station at Narragansett noticed a small patch of fire on the East Tower building. He immediately notified the fire departments of Narragansett, Wakefield, and Peacedale, who raced to the fire over the roads brilliantly lighted by a full September noon, and all conceded when they had arrived that the Imperial was doomed. No ladders owned by the departments could reach the fire on the tower, and no pumper could provide sufficient water pressure on the blaze. As the sun rose that morning, it was a scene of desolation, nothing left standing except the tall chimney and the rear of the building, which, as the clock struck 7, rocked back and forth several times, and then with a tremendous fall came to the ground. Hotel Imperial was no more, but we might say it went down in a blaze of glory, thus avoiding the wrecker's hammer, which sooner or later would have very likely been its fate.